Okay, we are live. Heather,
I know.
you're in the darkness. What happened? Where'd the light go?
I don't know what. I just got dark. Hold on. Hold the phone.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, I've got to find us again. There we are. Okay.
Awesome. All right, hello everybody. Give us a hello in the chat. Tell us where you are calling from today. We are very excited to speak with you about MBA interviews, our very favorite subject.
Timely.
Yeah. How many interview prep calls have you done so far, Heather, this year?
Just one.
Okay.
This one.
It's still early.
I'm working with a lot of round 2 applicants this year.
It's still early. It's still early in the process because we've had Kellogg, Harvard has come out, Stanford's rolling in kind of a weird, slow way. A lot of schools still haven't released yet, so we're still early in the process.
How do you feel about the guaranteed interview, applying early and meeting the guaranteed interview deadline?
You know, I was talking about this with someone today. I think the guaranteed interview is not it's not that important for most people. If you have weaknesses in your profile and you're really good in person, like you know that live communication is a strength of yours and you come off as very approachable and likable, then it can be really good to get the guaranteed interview because it adds a dimension to your candidacy that you know is a strength. But otherwise, as I'm going to talk about in just 5 minutes here, when they're making the final decision, the whole application comes back onto the table. So they're not just deciding on you based on the interview, they're deciding based on everything. And so if the core of your candidacy is strong enough, you should get an interview anyway. So getting the early forced interview, the guaranteed interview, doesn't necessarily matter. It just depends on you. And the only other advantage to it, I think, is that it signals a kind of a commitment to that school. It signals that you're serious about that school, which, of course, the schools that offer it like.
Yeah, right.
That's a good thing to do. Okay, so I have a couple of slides today, actually. I really want to introduce you all to the very basics of this is like foundational. This is like MBA interviews 101. This is the most basic information that you really need to embark on the journey of preparing for your interviews. But I think that the 18 or so slides that I'm going to show you today are super, super important. If you haven't been thinking about your MBA interviews in this way, you may be approaching it slightly wrong. And in fact, what a lot of people tend to do when they go to prepare for their interview is they really want to make it like perfect. So they end up over rehearsing. They might even like take a video of themselves. You know, you're really, really trying to get it right. And that can actually conflict with what you really want your performance to align with. So I'm just going to talk through. Hey, Andrew, great to see you. I'm just going to talk through a couple of principles to keep in mind about MBA interviews. And then we're just going to take whatever questions you have. So this is like an introduction, like the must knows, the things you have to remember for your MBA interview. And then we can get into whatever questions you all have about general interviews, specific school interviews, all that stuff. So just for reference, if you didn't know, I wrote a book about interviews, and we're kind of going to talk a little bit about like the first 2 chapters today. That's kind of what's happening here. This book is on Amazon. Check it out. People like it. It actually talks about the MBA a lot in there. It's for any interview, but of course, you guys, you MBA applicants, you're my people. So this book is really for you. All right. So keeping in mind, the interview fits in to the big picture, not as a trump card, not as like the only final hurdle to cross, but just one more piece of the puzzle. So If you recall, in your applications, you've got your resume, in which they are gauging your professionalism, your accomplishments, your success to date. What's up, Alex? Ciao. Then in your essays and your personal statement, they're looking at your values, your character, your personality, your vision for your future, your fit with the school. Okay, so just between these two things, they already have a pretty complete picture of who you are. And then we get into recommendations, which is re-emphasizing all of those through the eyes of another person who can vouch for you. And then finally, we've got the interview. And the interview is not only reinforcing the whole picture of everything that they already know, it's also filling in the blanks. And blanks are things like this: your personality, your likability, your maturity, your genuineness, your level of enthusiasm for the program. These are things that don't really come across in black and white. And so they have to have a live in person or live Zoom picture of you to really understand what kind of classmate you're going to be, what kind of student you're going to be. So this is the purpose of the interview. It's not to add new information beyond the human dimension. That's really all it's about. So we tend to think this is just like human nature. You know, you went through whatever it was, 16 years of nonstop schooling, where everything was a test. You know, there was a right answer. There were 10 questions. If you got 9 of them right, that was pretty good. And so you've really been trained to approach life like a test. And in fact, many people start their MBA essays like tests. But eventually you realize that the MBA essays are not a test, and neither are interviews. So if you are thinking about the interview as a test that you have to pass, that is already going to lead you in the wrong direction, because the interviewer does not have like a set of answers that they're matching your answers against. There's not like a right or wrong answer to any of these questions. And so you want to set aside this mindset. And maybe I have a couple ways to think about this that might be helpful. So if you've been through job interviews, which all of you have, you know that typically recruiters are looking for the one person that they're going to hire from the masses, whereas MBA admissions committees are taking a bunch of people. They're going to invite 600, 1,000 students to join the class. So this dynamic is quite different between a job and an MBA. So when a hiring manager is looking to make a decision, they're going to take the person they like the most from the group of qualified applicants. The MBA side is almost the reverse. They're going to take the group of applicants that they like the most after the interview, and then they're going to finally choose the most qualified from that set. So this is why it's possible to do really well on the interview and still not get in, and why it's possible to just do okay on the interview and get in, because qualifications are still on the table. Here's another visualization. So it's like the people that they're not interviewing are, for whatever reason, they believed less qualified than the rest of the pool that they decided to interview. If you're thinking about this kind of like no man's land of the wait list or interview reject, it's one of two things. It's either that they didn't like you in the interview. So the person interviewing you couldn't come away and say, yes, this is a Kellogg kind of person, or this is a Columbia person. They belong here. So either they didn't like you, or they did like you, but you were, again, less qualified than the group of people who were admitted. If you're waitlisted, it means that they really liked you, but you might have been a little bit less qualified. There are other reasons to get waitlisted. We'll do one of these for waitlists later. And then the people who are admitted are the people that are the most qualified from the people they liked. So the first screen line is about your qualifications. Basically, it's about the quality of your candidacy. Then the interview is all about likability. We're no longer in the realm of qualifications. We're dealing with your personality, your sense of humor, your character. And then finally, qualifications come back on the table for the final decision. And they're also including portfolio strategy here, which is just like making a well-rounded, diverse class. So they might have loved you and you might have been super qualified. But then if there were enough other people like you who were also likable and qualified, you still might not get in. And those are the biggest heartbreakers, where it's like you had the most amazing candidacy and then there were just enough people that had a slightly stronger one that you didn't get in. But yeah, Heather.
So Angela, okay, on behalf of people out there that are wondering, they're comparing notes with their friends and the other, folks that are applying. And so let's say they don't get an interview, but on paper they are more qualified than the person next to them. What's the rationale behind that? How can they reconcile that?
So we're not really talking about essay writing. I mean, we could do so many YouTube lives about essay writing, and for round 2, we almost certainly will. But your communication skills are absolutely core to clearing this bar. It's not just the raw underlying statistics. It's the quality of the candidacy that you submit. And so that includes essays. It includes how good your resume is. It includes how well your recommenders supported your candidacy. So there's a lot in the execution stage of the application that can really make a difference. And 2 people with equal qualifications might have completely different outcomes based on the way they communicated in the application itself. That's a really good question.
And then what about demographics? Do they come into play at this sort of level, do you suppose?
Yeah, demographics come into play at every stage, and it's just logical. You can't have a class full of 100% women, right? There has to be some women, some men, some people from North America, some people from South America, some people of Asian descent, some people of African descent, some et cetera, et cetera. So they need a mix of people. And then likewise, they need consultants, they need bankers, but they also need nonprofits, and they need educators, and they need a diversity, because you're going to learn so much from your fellow students that they have to balance the portfolio. This is what we call portfolio strategy. And so it can happen that you don't get an interview because of the school's portfolio strategy, meaning that you were let's say you were in the top 20 of people like you, but they only decided to interview 10 people like you. It's like that. So those kinds of things are always in play. But of course, those of you who are listening along, is anyone applying in round 2? Leave us a comment, drop a comment and tell us, are you applying in round 2, or are you preparing for interviews? Where are you at in your journey? Because if you're applying in round 2, you still have the whole application ahead of you, and you can do the very best that you can do to to show them that you deserve the interview and that you belong at the school. That's kind of what the whole application is really all about. But here's the bottom line for interviews. Awesome. Okay. Some folks are in round 2. So you've still got all the communication of the application ahead of you. So stick with us, please. Subscribe. We'll be back again and again to help you on that journey. But we're also here for interviews. And so this is really maybe the most important page to understand leading into interviews. If you're getting an interview, that means you already cleared this bar. You're qualified enough. They don't waste their time interviewing people that they know they're going to reject. There had to have been enough interesting about you that they decided you were appropriately qualified. By the way, this also works for This is also for jobs. If you're getting a job interview, it means that your skill level, your qualifications are right in the sweet spot where you fit well enough. And so at that point, the decision factors in the interview shift from qualifications to the soft skills, to your likability, the connection that the person interviewing you feels, whether they trust you or not. This is the famous airport test. This is what we used to call this when I was a recruiter at BCG, which is, again, it's the airport test. So the question is, do they pass the airport test? If you're stuck in an airport with this person and there's nothing else to do but talk to them, are you going to feel good about that or not? And this is even more important for business school because of what we just said. You're going to learn the most during your MBA program from your classmates. So the AdCom is really trying to telescope who's going to be a student that people want to sit next to. Who's going to be the person that everyone is going to want to tap to be in their group? And do you know that they compare notes? Like after you get in, the AdCommers are like paying attention to what happens to their candidates on campus. And they're watching to see who is successful within their culture. So this is a really big deal. And this is the thing that fundamentally they can really only gauge in a live conversation, in an interview. So this is the point of the interview. Given that the point of the interview is for them to gauge your likability, the kind of student that you're going to be, you really need to get rid of the notion that it's a test, and you need to think of the interview as the beginning of a relationship. So what does that mean? Well, I recommend that you make human connection your goal in the interview. Don't make it your goal to impress them or to convince them or to persuade them. Make it your goal to build a relationship with someone who may end up being in your community for the rest of your career. So here's your mantra. My interviewer is my friend, and I'm helping them get to know me better. That's your goal. If you do this, you're already going to be in a better position than 60 or 70%, probably 80 or 90% of MBA applicants, because you're approaching it with the mindset that is going to position you to perform the best. Because if you're getting to know someone who's going to be your friend, you're not trying to pass a test. You're really just trying to help them get to know you. You're trying to share yourself, your experiences, your insights, and your successes and even your failures. So couple last things about MBA interviews. Most MBA interviews are blind, meaning that the interviewer doesn't know anything about you before the conversation. At most, they have your resume, and they're going to learn everything that they know about you during that conversation. Notably, some schools conduct intimate interviews. Harvard, London, MIT, NYU, ISB. These schools have interviews that are usually conducted by the AdCom, and where the person interviewing you has read your entire application. Those interviews have a very different flavor and a very different vibe, but most of your interviews will be blind. And so that means it truly is a blank page. You get to establish that relationship exactly how you want. And so here is my 6-part framework for all the components of the average interview. And what you'll find is that most interviews kind of follow this flow. So you've got some kind of chit chat while you're sitting down or getting the Zoom working. Then there's almost always this general big opening question. Walk me through your resume. Tell me about yourself. Just a chance for you to share the big picture and to really set the stage for a meaningful conversation. Then there are almost always going to be some kind of behavioral questions, meaning tell me about a time you led a team, tell me about a conflict, the chance for you to really tell a detailed story about your past experiences. Then they will ask point blank questions. What's the most interesting book you read lately? What's your leadership style? What's a weakness? And these questions are usually digging around deeper. They're getting at your values and vulnerabilities. And then finally, we're going to talk about the future. And so that's like, what are your goals? Why do you want to go to this school? Why do you want an MBA? And the last stage is not always. Some schools don't have this, but some do. And that is, what questions do you have for me? So you're then going to prepare a few questions to ask the interviewer and really, really listen to what they say and engage and make it a dialogue. Okay, really good question here in the chat. We're almost to the end of the slides, but I'm going to go ahead and hold on. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and field this question. Think it's better to interview in person when that's an option, or is it okay to go virtual, especially for internationals? So really good question. Heather, I'm going to let you chime in on this because I know that you have such intimate knowledge of the different schools. I'll just talk from my own personal experience. So when I was applying abroad, I was applying from Asia. I was living in Asia when I applied. And at that time, most of the schools sent someone to my geography to do the conversation in person. And so I showed up in person for those. And this was before the days of Zoom. So the other interviews were conducted via phone. And that was a different kind of stress. But what I will say is this: schools, from the school's perspective, they understand how hard it is for you to travel. So I don't think they're going to expect you to cross an ocean to get to the interview. And if you're able to, if you can, like let's say you live in London and they're sending people to Paris and you're able to make that trip from London to Paris to do the interview, it's a good idea to go. I think, especially if you do well in person. So it's less about how does the school interpret it. It's more about what plays to your strengths and to your
Yeah.
preferences. Would you agree, Heather? What do you think?
Of course, 100%. And, after, especially after post-COVID, and then even just a few years later, and everyone is more used to being online. And, we can actually, I think we can all agree that we can even form relationships with people on Zoom now. Whereas when it started, we were a little bit, it was awkward. So now I think it's totally fine. But definitely, Alex, if you can in person, attend if you can. But they totally understand. It's not a ding if you can't. But if you can, that's always nice.
Yeah. Okay. And so just a couple of last things for those of you who are approaching interviews and you'd like the support of the MBA protocol team. We just introduced a bunch of interview services. So like one-on-one prep sessions. We have a toolkit that like breaks down all of these question types and helps you construct answers to them. So check out this link here, mbaprotocol.com /services/interview. And here I can even put it on the screen. This will be fancy. If you are interested in support on really constructing answers to those questions that allow you to show your best self and build a connection. And so the kind of final punchline of my little slide deck there is, your goal is to really create a relationship. It's to bring yourself into that conversation just ready to share who you are, but confident that the stories you're going to tell are going to highlight your best self. Because I think, we all know what it's like to like overshare and to when an answer just goes off the rails. That can happen to anyone. And so you want to do the level of preparation that allows you to feel really confident telling the right stories, answering questions about weakness, talking about the school and the goals that you have in a way that is totally natural for you, human, real, you're being yourself, but you also know that the content of your communication is really, really strong and inspiring. So that's your goal in the interviews. And I'm now we can now take any questions that you all have. We've worked on just about every school, every top school you can imagine. So if you have specific questions about schools, let us know. Here's a question. Sanity check. Any reason to be worried if it's been radio silent? No, unfortunately. I don't know how many videos I've made over the years about how to survive this window of time right here, this worst aspect of the admissions process when you're just waiting and all you can do is twiddle your thumbs and wait for good news. And schools move on their own timeline. There's a randomness to who they notify and when. And so just try to enjoy life. No news is no news, basically. That's it. I know how frustrating it is this moment here. All right, excellent. Heather, do you have anything to add? Any words of inspiration for these folks?
Inspo, I don't know if I have inspo. I was thinking about some of the behavioral questions, and we could talk a little bit about, if we have time. We've got 5 minutes. What the interviewer is really looking for when they ask the behavioral questions. Like, for example, if they ask about leadership, how to frame that, and actually, I think the one that I think is interesting is the challenge. Any challenges, because it actually talks about your character and how you solve problems on campus. Because it's not just like, oh, did you figure it out? They're not looking for resourcefulness. They're looking for community mindedness. Low ego. How did you sort through this? I think so. More soft skills. It's more soft skill oriented. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that we can share with our viewers.
That's an awesome question, Heather. So I actually think that every behavioral question should get at an element of conflict. Like there should be a challenge in just about every story you're going to tell. And I think there's two facets, two answers. So he's like, what are they looking for? So one thing that they're looking for is just general executive presence communication skills.
Yes.
Your ability to tell a story that brings me from point A to point Z and takes me with you emotionally. This is really what my whole book is about. This is a lot of what our coaching and our toolkits are about, is helping people like really tell a rich story that exudes confident humility. Let's put it that way. So they're really looking, they're vibe checking you. Let's just put it that way. They're vibe checking how you communicate. So that's all soft skills. It's all the stuff that I just said, likability, connection. And then there's another kind of part of your question, which is like, what are the values? What are the stories that you should be telling? If they're asking you about leadership or they're asking you about a challenge, what are the values that you want to highlight? And so that varies by school. You definitely want to research the school that you're interviewing with. You want to know what their values are. You want to know what's important to them. You want to be able to show those values in your stories, and align with them, from the perspective of what Heather's pointing to, which is that it's not just about being the smartest person or cracking the nut. It's also about bringing others along with you and having influence and showing that you care about others, you lift others up, you have these softer leadership qualities. And so any story truly well told should demonstrate all of that. And that's your goal in the behavioral question. It's to talk about one experience. If I say, tell me about a leadership experience, you want to talk about one experience in a way that allows me to fully appreciate like your values and how you operate. It's like a microcosm for your whole career, that one little question.
And I think too, like when you're thinking for people who are prepping, if you're thinking about leadership, think about, what does leadership look like? It shows up, it shows up when things are difficult. It brings the team with you, or it's not just you kicking ass, and, oh, this is what I did. It's not that. That's ego, right? So, think holistically about the answers as you're prepping. What do these things mean to you?
I love what you're pointing to, Heather, because the schools that ask behavioral questions in particular are all schools that have those style of community values. Like where they don't want everybody who wants to lead from the front.
Right.
They want people who understand what it means to collaborate and influence with no positional power. Kellogg.
Yeah, so Kellogg's in my mind,
Booth.
for sure.
Yeah, Kellogg, Tuck, Booth. But really, like even Columbia, MIT, Stanford, all the schools that are behaviorally heavy or even have a few in their interview share those values. Okay, here's a cool question. What on a follow-up question, like, tell us about a second weakness. What are your thoughts on what they're testing for? That's a really interesting question. So Heather, I have plenty to say, but do you have a thought?
No, I actually want to hear how you'd answer this, because I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure out what Andrew's asking. If there's a follow-up, right? You tell us about a weakness.
You said one weakness. Yeah, I was like, here, what's your biggest weakness? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, now tell me about a second weakness. So especially when you're interviewing with students and alumni, the interviewee experience is going to vary based on the personality of the person you're talking to. If you're talking to the AdCom, They tend to have a pretty standardized process. They kind of have like a mandate on how they want to make you feel as the interviewee. And so you're going to find like a Harvard interview is a Harvard interview is a Harvard interview, and it's pretty consistent. When you get to schools like Kellogg, Dartmouth, Michigan, all the schools where students and alums are doing the interviews, you're kind of beholden to the personality and interview style of your interviewer. So there will be people who think they need to give you the poker face. Like that's how they're going to test you. And there will be people who kind of, they got put through some kind of interview ringer and they're still scarred. So they're going to like grill you a little bit. That's just their interview style. So Andrew, I could see that question being a little bit of a grill you, like, okay, well, give me another one, hot shot. Let's see what you got. Like they kind of are trying to put you on the spot and see what you do with a tricky question. Because everybody prepares for one weakness. Not everybody prepares for two or three. So it could partly be that, and you should just roll with that. Like, don't take that personally. That's just their style. Some people just have that style. So don't take that personally if it is that kind of a question. And then the second reason it could be is because you gave them one type of answer and they just want to see if you can go deeper. And so Kellogg routinely has come up with what are your 3 greatest weaknesses questions. Yeah, you had one for 6. Yeah, so like I'm a huge fan of talking about failure and weaknesses. There's no depths to which I will not go when telling stories about my own life. And in the book Interview Hero, I think I have an entire chapter. I think I might have 2 chapters on talking about weakness and failure, because it's actually where you really, really win the interview. This is the thing. People are afraid to talk about weakness and failure. If you can go there and still show confident humility, you will beat everyone.
Yeah.
So if you can come up with 6 weaknesses and be able to talk about that, like I could do it right now. I could easily name 6 weaknesses right now and talk about them, with competence and depth.
Well,
And that's winning. So that's what
the
I would
thing.
say.
Sorry, Angela, I'm jumping in on top of you, but it's got to be real. Like it has to be a real failure. You have to have a real one. And I've actually seen some things when people come through like, I guess I don't have enough failures. I'm like, well, you've got to work on that, because I've got to take a segue. And I'm sorry for anybody that's heard the story before, but IMD in Switzerland is one of my favorite schools. And it has to do with the dean that I met. It's doing an admissions event at Centre Court years ago in London. And we had a guy stand up in the back and he said, look, I just told the story this morning. Sorry, it's on my mind. And he said, we were interviewing a panel of deans in London. And the young man stood up and said, look, I've tried to start 2 businesses and they both failed, like majorly failed. Am I wasting my time? Should I even apply? And the then dean, who's now, he's left his deanship and is now teaching again at IMD, Sean Meehan, one of my favorite school officials, he said, we don't want you if you've never failed. Don't apply. And then he put the crowd through an exercise. Everybody stand up, and only the people that were remaining were the people who have had the most failures. And he said, you guys apply. And of course, he was just making a statement. And he was in it, but it really stuck with me. So I think when you're talking about failures in your interview, in your essays, on your resume, or not in your resume, but when you're addressing failures, it's got to be meaningful. You have to really have learned something. You've got to take accountability for it and really own it and show how it's changed you, and how you've grown because of it. And it's a good thing. So sorry, you had to talk about 6 of them, Alex, or weaknesses anyway.
Yeah, and the weaknesses. So I have a framework for you guys that tells you exactly how to address the weakness question, and you want to plan out all 4 pieces of like, what's the weakness, what's the genuine impact, and then how are you working to turn it around? Because they're looking for a growth mindset. To Sean's point, it's like the MBA is about growth, and growth is about trial, and trial is about failure. And if you can't do that, then what are you doing?
Right. And self-reflection, it's kind of it's a personality test in a way.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, don't shy away from those questions. Prepare 5 or 6 weaknesses, 5 or 6 failures, And then get to the point where you really enjoy talking about them as well.
Yeah.
Because they're much more interesting stories. I mean, let's be honest. Like, success is great, but it's just not that interesting after the fact. It's way more interesting to talk about when things went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually another way to make a good human connection, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'll show you my humanity, you show me yours.
Mm-hmm. One experience we all share: failure. Any other questions? Thanks so much for joining us today.
Any news, guys?
Good to see you guys. I read between the lines that there's anxiety about the silence.
Yes, there is, but it is a little quiet, I think, right now.
It's a little early. It's a little early because most schools aren't really getting around to releasing invites until the middle of October. It's the exceptions where they get it out by early October. So,
thanks, Alex.
Okay, everybody. Great to see you. We're gonna do more of these. We're gonna do more of these. Yeah, enjoy the silence. Very good.
I think
Very good. That song's making the round again. They've remade it, and there's now like a house club version of that song. Enjoy the silence. I'll put it in the I'll put it in the description of this video once it goes live. You guys can listen to that track. All right, everybody. Good luck with your interviews. If you want to work with us, you want support preparing your very best stories and getting ready to build that human connection in your interviews, check us out over here. We have all kinds of little ways that we can support you. And we'd absolutely love to do that. And otherwise, we'll see you here sometime soon.
Keep us posted.
Everybody.